Hello, Zoe here, and I am back in another speed paint type situation. I'm making another video. So, I had this idea, and for like a setting, and it's been living in my head for like a comic series or thing, which I might wind up making, like just occasionally upload a few pages and that wind up telling a story or something. I don't know. It might be a thing. It might not be. Future me will decide. But anyways, it's like a fantasy 1920s, but it's on like this desert island, and it has like food stuff being banned instead of just like all alcohol and magic. So you probably had like a similar thought to what I did when I first said 1920s, but food stuff is banned instead of alcohol. Well, including alcohol, but I had to figure out why is this the case? So I figured, okay, it's a nation that is on a desert island, and it was blockaded in kind of a big, like, World War I type situation, because 1920s is kind of the vibe of the time period I am basing this off of. And it's kind of hard to grow food in a desert itself. So during that period of blockade, the enemy's goal was obviously, let's starve them out, force them to surrender that way. But the corporation, like type organization, they found a way to magically conjure food. And unfortunately, I have decided for the sake of this is that it really tastes bad. And a lot of people are very motivated by good tasting food. So that gives the reason for people to be smuggling in food when the only food available is awful. But I'll get a little bit more into the specifics on why the food would have to be smuggled in a little bit, because for now I'm going to be talking about this character that I'm drawing. So I should start off by saying this is Olive Fisher. There's the name that I've come up with. I know, genius, very on the nose for a feline character. It might be a placeholder, it might not be. I might decide, who knows, maybe to get rid of it and name her something else. But for now, Olive Fisher. So, why'd she join a gang who primarily smuggles foodstuffs? I figured her family used to own a fishing company, but because of the blockade, it wound up becoming too dangerous because their enemy's goal was to starve out the population to force them into surrender, and apparently they weren't above doing war crimes and targeting fishing vessels. So the family wound up having to sell its assets and the company and everything to essentially this a corporation. I don't have a name for it quite yet, but they never wound up reopening those fishing companies, and instead just wound up scrapping all of the ships and having them remade into other things. So essentially, Olive became a smuggler to help prevent her family from sliding into poverty. And there is a lot of money to be made in smuggling in food, because it's a very dangerous job. I figured for the sake of this, she owns a smaller fishing vessel, one of the few that her family did not sell off, and she will drive around the island, pick up from different food stops and other places to bring them back into the city that are either dropped off from smugglers that bring it deliberately from the other nearby nations to the island. For her, I definitely do want her personality to be a lot more cat-like, because she is a feline, and I feel like a lot of the time when there's like cat characters, they're just like human but with cat ears, but don't really act a whole lot more like a cat. So I kind of want to try and make her act more like a cat, kind of basing it off the personalities of the two that I have. I did base her name off of the cat that Jacob and Julia have from Drawfeast / Secret Sleepover Society. Their cat Olive, I just thought that would be kind of cute. And her last name Fisher is because her family used to be fishermen, essentially. So I figured that kind of worked for a naming sense, but again, her last name might change, first name also could change. Who knows what future me decides. A little bit more about this mega corporate organization type of deal. it does pretty much own everything in the city, I do want to say. Like, it controls like all of the imports and exports. They're in charge of shipping, they have all of the factories, every major resource essentially. So they've won capitalism and are making it everybody else's problem. They don't import food because from the way that they see it, it's just cheaper to conjure it, and sure, it takes a lot of effort to make it taste good, but well, they're the rich ones that can afford those kinds of chefs. So the main export that is sent out would be mainly the magic crystals, or these magic crystals that do grow on this island. They're not the only place in the world where these crystals do grow, but they are the major use of implementing magic into technology. So if you work in artificery, you need to find a place where these grow. I also do want this corporation to be more powerful than essentially the local government. Like, the local government is pretty much just a joke in comparison to what the corporation wants, or they're just essentially in their back pocket, and it's them running the show. And they also have a paramilitary organization. There we go, I've said it, I've said the word, that basically does all of the policing and investigation into the smuggling that the more local police forces or smaller police forces don't do because of like bribery and that sorts of stuff. Another thing that they did is they invented the automaton, which is going to conveniently transition into me talking about this character. Frank, they're not like the other automatons because they actually have a thinkable brain. Like, they're a person, not just a machine set to do a specific task, like all of the others are. I do want him to have been an experiment by the Megacorpo. Maybe that's just what I'll call it, Megacorpo. Just as a name that's like, yeah, I didn't really want to name it, but they do everything. So basically he wound up escaping this whole experiment type thing by pretending to have essentially broken on the actual thinking and mental side of things, so they eventually just shut them down and tossed them out. Eventually, they were dug up by either gang members or gang boss of this group that I'm gonna be following, and reactivated and decided that, well, they don't want to be viewed as a machine, and they don't want to be viewed as just an experiment, so they revealed their sentient, and basically wound up working for them as a mechanic, sometimes going on the smuggling jobs for this gang. Usually they pretend to be just a normal automaton with a bit of a different design, because it's easier to explain, yeah, this automaton moves boxes around because they can carry a lot more weight, than it is to explain, yeah, I'm a experimental automaton that the corporation is definitely gonna want back if they ever find out that I exist and am actually functional. So his original design, because I went through a few design phases before actually working on the drawing that you're seeing now, and my first thought was, I'm like, why don't I make him like based off of like the front ends of like a 1920s car? And, you know, I didn't really like it, but, you know, it eventually led to this, so that's pretty cool. I'm not sure if there's someone who is like essentially a brain that's been put into a jar, or like someone's soul that has been put into a jar, or a copy of another individual that was running the experiment, or if they're like a successful general artificial intelligence. Although that last one seems a bit far-fetched for the vibes of this setting, because it's like fantasy 1920s, and general artificial intelligence definitely feels more like a sci-fi type of a vibe. So it's probably going to be one of the previous three. Haven't quite figured it out. And their name is Frank, solely so that way that they can make the joke of, can I be frank with you? When they're wanting to have a serious conversation with someone. I also have like some history blurbs in there that kind of helped shape this island and would maybe play effects into different stories that could be told within the setting. So I'm just gonna quickly give some bullet points just so that way that someone knows about it. So first of all, the island was settled by a nearby-ish nation And, they, integrated the local population, as revisionist historians would tell you. As most others would say, integrated is a very gentle way of putting it. After that, the city itself, or the capital that would become the capital city of the island, was raised above ground due to some sewage problems that were very similar to how Seattle was when the Seattle Underground was created, so that way that this city also does have a large underground city that is largely abandoned. Eventually, this island would become an independent island nation with the help of some larger nations and other political shenanigans, which sort of helps with the whole shipping and blockade type problems that happen later. So, as we get to that next bullet point, Fantasy World War I happens. The island is essentially blockaded, and fishing vessels and other ships that are meant to provide food and other resources to it are essentially sunken, and Megacorpo becomes, or essentially starts its rise to power in the nation. Eventually the war would end, but Megacorpo wouldn't really change its import policy on food, so smuggling wound up becoming a thing. Our final character in our main trio, her name is Rose Annie, and I mean honestly that's kind of a placeholder, and honestly I think Annie Rose sounds better, and I'm also not entirely sure how I want her to be. She was just kind of a character I put in there with some vague ideas, and I've had others that I've thought of later that I might add to it, or I might not. Who knows? What I am sure about is that I want her to be more of a partier, like, she actually loves the nightlife and the Undercity and that sorts of stuff, and she's also someone who joins at the beginning of this whole adventure, ? I kind of want her to be a lens into the underground city for the audience, so having her essentially join the gang at the start of the series is a good way to try and achieve that. I am toying with the idea of her being like a plant, not as in like a plant, but like a plant as in spy. And I'm thinking that it could be from, like, a rival nation, perhaps the one that they separated from and wound up blockading earlier, as a way to try and help sow some chaos and discontent. And that could also offer a good lens for the audience, because they don't really know anything about the city itself, because they are foreign to it, so it would just give, like, a good lens to the audience who also would not live in this city, and it could be a relation point, I guess, or a good way to be able to throw in some exposition that the character wouldn't know. Another option that I had was making her a plant from Megacorpo. This could definitely create a lot of drama and be used as a very good plot device for later in the series. And, could also be like a thing of, oh, my employers are actually awful. And I mean, this isn't good either, but something needs to change about that. And who knows, it could make for a bit of an interesting story. Okay, that's all I have time for today with this video. I've actually been wanting to make it for a while, because this idea has been living in my head for months, and I've been thinking about it for a long time. So, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I've been enjoying this. If you did wind up enjoying it, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to see more of this, hit the subscribe button. If there's a suggestion that you want me to draw, or an idea, or anything you want to say, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye!